And while we're in reverse, why don't we check out those lights? See it! See the light! Hey, real quick before we start this video, a lot of you guys have been asking for team shirts. Finally, Autohaus has t-shirts, so it would really help out a lot if you supported the shop, got some merch, some shirts, stickers, support the media work, support me and my dog. Check out that merch store so I don't starve you guys. Alright, so I had a hair of time after hours to work on this guy, so armed with some new important knowledge, let's go take a look. Alright, so obviously clutch and pressure plate got installed. What happened? So thank you LOJ prompt response. If you notice how close those two guys are and how much wider those two guys are, this pressure plate gets clocked in an exact position on the flywheel. So that was the issue. How come those holes wouldn't line up? Hopefully today we can get the trans in for the final time. A few things before I put the trans back in. I got the GK Tech conversion clutch line, so just to recap, the slave is on this side now, so the line's gonna go from here down to here. Of course, we're gonna have to heat management over in this area. Oh, I had to cut a lot bit more out of this guy to shift into all 7 gears, first through 6th in reverse. So yeah, I'm going to clean this up before I put the trans back in. Reverse still needs to be wired up, but if we get it today, we can actually test the reverse lights. Still waiting on the drive shaft from South Bay Driveline. Still gonna keep this a 2-piece. I'm really hoping I can have the Skyline for the weekend. And with that being said, yeah, let's get to work. All right, getting ready to plug this guy back in for the umpteenth time. Got our breather off of the RB25 trans. You can see this guy actually is gonna fit really nicely. Alright, so this transmission was an absolute bear to get back in. Let's go take a look. So a few keys. I have a pole jack under the crank pulley to tilt the engine back. Undid both sides engine mounts, almost all the way backed off all 4 subframe bolts. Get this guy lower and as tilted back as possible. All the bell housing bolts are in there, and again, this was an absolute bear to get these guys to line up. This bell housing is absolutely gigantic compared to the tunnel. I actually had to hammer out a few other areas just because I could not get enough clearance to get the bell housing up and then in. But here we are. Alright, so fighting the transmission for that long, it's a lot later than I wanted. So I'm just gonna get the trans mount set in there and then we'll start again next day.
The next day.
Alright, next day after work, let's get an update. So if we remember those holes in the transmission, like where we had to notch it out for the starter, I got this heat shielding stuff left over from another project. It's paper backed and it's adhesive on one side. So if you check out up there, I got a few strips to cover up that starter hole. And then same thing on this side. There used to be a gaping hole right there. Transmission should be in for real now. Knock on wood. Where's some wood? Ended up getting, I believe these are 15mm aluminum spacers off of McMaster. Same thing, got some appropriate sized metric bolts off McMaster. These washers were just left over from my stash. And yeah, you can tell I was able to get the transmission a lot higher, but then shifter clearance is really tight now. Another thing we'll talk about when we go up top, I also set the reverse lockout plate on the CD009 shifter. If you notice, I extended the reverse wire harness. I have some ties that'll tie this against the bell housing. So this goes over here, it's gonna go over and then right there. So when we go back up top, let's see if we can get that reverse light to work. All right, so before we check out the reverse lights, just taking a look at what this tunnel looks like. Excuse that touch-up paint, apply touch-up paint where I cut to make sure this guy doesn't rust. It's gonna be a little tough to see, but how tall the CD009 shifter sits up there now. But again, I didn't want that transmission being the lowest part of the car, so I wanted to mount this as high as I could. If you're wondering, I put M6 right there to just let me know it's M6 Allens. Nothing worse than like, oh man, gotta go walk across the shop and go find my Allen keys. And then what size do I need? Just a few other things. I cut a hole in the bottom boot. This boot was actually really tight up top and it wouldn't even mount in that forward position. You can see how far back the shifter sits now. So I'm gonna use that boot. I got an arrow to show you which way forward this goes. So it looks like I should be able to reuse this boot, the OEM boot assembly, but I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with that. So yeah, one more time, why don't we row through the gears? 5, 6. Again, I set the reverse lockout plate according to CD009's video, so I'm gonna press it down and reverse. And while we're in reverse, why don't we check out those lights? What do you think? Yes? No? See it! See the light! Good stuff.
The next day.
Alright, back on a Saturday. Inside the car means home stretch. Alright, so the part I absolutely hate about transmission swaps, it's the interior. I don't want noise, I don't want air, I don't want stuff, I don't want to smell the exhaust through here. And unfortunately, this is always my pain point with transmission swaps. And then to no particular company's fault, right? This is just kind of stuff you have to deal with. So, if you notice how tall the CD009 shifter sits now, you notice I cut away the metal portion, and then I also just recently just cut this slit right here. And why, right? So 2nd and 6th is not that bad, but 4th, this guy is still tugging on the boot, and you really don't want any pressure on this shifter. I've had it before where if the boot's too taut, it can actually pop this guy out of gear. So we're going to try that, but for sure this is really taut on the boot. Again, these are nice because the boot is supposed to slip fit over these guys. Unfortunately, if I slip fit these guys over, you know what, I take it back. Why don't we slip these guys over and see what happens? All right, got my 2 inserts in there. You can see if I completely compress this guy on, it gets really tight into 4th. I assume it's gonna be tight in 2nd and 6th too. So I think this is how I'm gonna run it. This is cool because then it reduces the amount of outside stuff that can get into the cabin, but yeah, still not ideal, but definitely better than nothing. Also with this extra width, it does put a little more pressure on 4th. So I gotta drive this around, see if this is like too much pressure, it's gonna pop out of 4th or not. All right, so here we are. You wouldn't even know. In the interim, before I find a long-term solution, I just carefully place gaffer's tape over the hole and left a lump so that there's still room to shift. But I take it back. This thing actually feels really good now that the interior's back together. Oh, tough. It's like you gotta use muscle to press it into reverse. But you know, that's what a lockout's for. So we'll take a look under the car, but yeah. Clutch hydraulics are there. Clutch feels really light for the level of clutch I bought, whether that's the HD or the XD, but I want to say this feels lighter than that Nismo clutch I had in there. Why don't we lift up the car and check out the progress? All right, got the car racked up. Why don't we do a quick recap? Engine to transmission braces, kept those guys. Got the starter hole covered up with the heat tape. Routed the reverse wire harness. I got this little OEM like reusable bendable tie to secure the wire harness up here. Pretty cool. You can see there's provisions for plenty of places to tie up the wire harness. Same thing here. Standoffs or spacers from McMaster. Yeah, this will give you a good idea of how low the transmission sits now. Much better than what I originally planned for. I'm actually pretty happy with this. The conversion clutch line came in from GK Tech. I wrapped this with the line sheathing, also from Thermotech, I believe. You can see the slave sits really close to that downpipe still, so I had my other technician, Michael, wrap this with header wrap. I'm hoping this is going to be enough. If not, probably make a slave cylinder heat shield. I've seen these on OEM from factory, but I'm really hoping this downpipe wrap's gonna be enough. So yeah, pretty obvious. Drive shaft's been delayed. I think the drive shaft's been there for like 2 weeks now, but it should be back this coming week. So I'll film the drive shaft when it comes in. The last part of this series, I'm hoping I can do a toge run, maybe even a track day, who knows, but get some real miles on this car, be able to report back my impressions. So yeah, appreciate all the support so far. Again, questions, comments, criticisms, all welcome. Make sure to leave a comment in the description below. CD009 swap into R33 GTST. I'm gonna catch you guys next time.